Hi, hello, and welcome, or welcome back, I suppose. Now, I will say I am using my front camera today. Hopefully you can't see too much of a difference, but I just wanted to point it out in case I start doing this and looking at me. I know what I'm like. I'm doing it because I know this is going to be an incredibly long video. Pray for me editing this in one day, but we know I've had issues with this before when I'm not filming with my front camera and we film something long and I end up losing bits of it. Look at the brow video. So I'm filming it with my front camera just because if I start to lose charge, which I shouldn't do because this should be charging, or if I start to run out of storage, I can stop recording, I can move it onto my laptop, and then we can continue. But let's get right on into it. So most of the books that I review for Bad Rep Book Club are simply panned by critics, yet they still have their fans. Now, that's not to say that the book we're looking at today doesn't still have its fans, but within the fandom of the series or saga as a whole, this tends to be the one that people just kind of go, listen, it's not that it's bad, but, which usually means they fucking hate it, but they don't want to say that because it makes them feel like they're not a real fan. So today we are delving back into the world of sparkly vampires and broody werewolves as we look at New Moon by Stephenie Meyer. So, welcome back to Bad Reputation Book Club. Everybody take a seat, start taking some notes because we're in this for the long haul, and let's see if it's true. Let's see if this book deserves the reputation that it's earned. Just a quick note before the main body of the review, I do have some trigger warnings to go over just in case this is something that is too much for you. This is stuff that features both in review and book. I don't believe there's anything else in the book that I don't cover here in the review, so I don't think this is a case of I'm gonna not mention something but you still go and try and read the book for yourself and then go, oh, but you didn't mention that, and it like messes you up. I don't want to have to do that. So our warnings are for suicide, abusive relationships, death, blood, and violence. Also, if you watched my halfway through the year review of what I've read last year, so my partway through 2023 review, then you will know that I have read this before. Now, I'll be honest, spoiler alert, but it's not the most memorable, so I kind of felt like I was going in fresh. A couple of things rang some oh yeah, I kind of remember this, but on the whole, it felt like going in fresh, so think of that what you will. The book opens up with a quote from Romeo and Juliet. Now, this is a point of comparison throughout the rest of the book, the comparison being mostly with Bella and Edward, but there's some other stuff with reference to Paris and, is it Rosamund? I keep wanting to say Rosalie, but obviously that's one of the Cullen sisters. I'm pretty sure it's Rosamund. So there's references with that in regards to Jacob and what if somebody beforehand and all that nonsense. But as literary comparisons go, it's not the worst that I've seen. I'm not going to be talking about it too much throughout. I'm going to be making, I think, one reference to it later. But bear in mind, I have my script in front of me. I know what I'm going to say. This isn't off the cuff. I could not do this video off the cuff. We saw what I did with that last month and it was a breakdown, but I've gone far more in detail with this one. And you know, it happens with a lot of romance, and especially teen and YA romance. You get literary allusions, usually in regard to the sort of stuff that the characters in the book either are or would be studying, bearing in mind the age of the characters in a book is usually linked to the audience that's supposed to be reading it, so they're going to have also been studying it. Now, this one, not the worst that I've seen. It's not great, it's a little bit ham-fisted, but as YA fiction goes, and just in general, it's not the worst that I've seen, even if it could be a little bit better. Preface. I felt like I was trapped in one of those terrifying nightmares. The ones where you have to run till your lungs burst, but you can't make your body move fast enough. As openings go, certainly could be worse. So, it's not the worst that I've read. It's actually really rather eye-catching. Now, the issue is you're naturally going to compare it to the opening of Twilight, which, whether you like the series or not, which you probably shouldn't, no matter how camp it is, no matter how fun the movies are, as long as you're looking at it for the right reason, either for the sake of a review type thing, or for the sake of, it's funny and ridiculous and bad. But anyway, no matter what you think of the Twilight saga, the opening to the first book is actually really fucking good. And unfortunately, this just doesn't live up to that, but it is a difficult thing to live up to. Like Twilight, this preface is not a direct quote, but is from a moment lifted much later in the novel. I'm going to assume this is basically the motif for all of the Twilight saga, if not all of Stephenie Meyer's work. I don't know if it's Meyer or Meyer. I will probably say them interchangeably, but it works. I think it's, again, eye-catching enough. I think it does what it has to do. Chapter 1, Party. So we open in, the actual story itself, we open that in Bella's dream. And it's a dream that kicks off a fair amount of the anxieties that Bella has. Now, there's a certain other kind of anxiety that she's got going on, but in terms of long-term stuff, stuff that's there at the beginning and is there at the end, this is the dream that really kicks off. It's clear that she's already had that, given that it's linked to her birthday, but this really takes it to the next level for her. That becomes kind of clear. Basically, she's in the meadow where she first saw Edward being all sparkly and shiny, and she comes across her grandmother, or at least who she believes to be her grandmother, and she doesn't have any reason to doubt that. And then, who else but Edward shows up, calling Bella's name, but then both her and her grandmother turn around. It wasn't Gran who called my name, and we both turned to see the addition to our small reunion. I didn't have to look to know who it was. This was a voice I would know anywhere, know and respond to, whether I was awake or asleep, or even dead, I'd bet. The voice I'd walk through fire for, or, less dramatically, slosh every day through the cold and endless rain for. Edward. Bella dampening her oh no, I'm being silly and overdramatic. It happens once and never again, and I don't understand why it happens here. Anyway, maybe it's just dream Bella and no other type of Bella here, but why now is the moment that, why is now rather the moment that you choose to go, actually, maybe I shouldn't be so overdramatic, when this whole fucking plot is based on every character in this book, especially fucking Bella and Edward, but everybody's just so overdramatic about everything. By the end of the dream, Bella comes to realize that, I think I mentioned this, that basically that's not her gran, it's her but older. And I can't remember if I said that. Brain. Yeah, it's not her gran, it's her but older. And it's basically an anxiety dream about the concepts of aging. Now, to an extent, I can kind of understand the idea of her going, I'm doing something that Edward can't, and eventually that's going to cause problems. Because, I don't know, at some point you're going to both look like nonces. Like, anybody who knows him knows he's 100 years older than you. And anybody that doesn't is going to see you dating a 17-year-old and being like, call the police, please. But, like, she's turning 18. She's not turning 80. Like, one, like I said, he's still 100 or so years older than you. Two, you're a year older than him in terms of that mental and physical age, because he will, from what I gather, forever be mentally and physically 17, and also forever kind of, but probably that's like a complicated kind of plot hole type thing, where he's still very much within the values he held when he was 17, so obviously that was 1918 when he was turned, and I wouldn't remember that year most of the time, but I only filmed the rundown a few days ago. Like, I scheduled that for upload on Monday. Today is Tuesday. I'm filming this at 9:30, which doesn't sound too bad, but it will probably be past midnight by the time I get this done. I'm probably not going to sleep tonight because I have to edit this tomorrow, and I need to be out the house early because there are people coming to the house tomorrow and I don't want to be in to see them. Anyway, let's not get distracted. This is going to be long enough. Yeah, so he's going to be stuck at that like 17 space forever. You being 18 isn't going to make that much difference, and I don't know what state laws are or whatever, but like, given that you're not doing anything beyond just being, you know, what, like they kiss sometimes, I think they'll be fine. Nobody's going to be calling the cops on them, especially given they were already in a relationship. Also, to the outside world, he's also probably like 18 at some point. So it's just like, you're not turning like 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. Like, you're not becoming an adult. You're just becoming a legal adult. You know? Nobody's going to see this and think there's something untoward, and I don't know why you think that as well. Despite Bella having told everybody that she does not want to celebrate her birthday, everybody's got her gifts, and when she gets to school, she sees Edward and Alice is there like lavishing her with attention and gifts, because basically until the end of the upcoming party, nobody respects her wishes. And also, as it comes to that party, hello Lily, are you coming up? Ow! Bruh! A cat. You might be gorgeous girl. So yeah, she's not like asked to go to this party. She's told she's going. Where are you going? No, you can't sit on me. No one bothered to stare at us as we took our usual seats in the back of the classroom. We had almost every class together now. It was amazing the favours Edward could get the female administrators to do for him. Edward and I had been together too long now to be an object of gossip anymore. Why do we give a shit about whether or not they are the centre of gossip? This isn't like the first one where a fair amount of it did take place within the school system. Next to none of this is linked to school. Like, you see her friends sometimes, and occasionally they are in school, but like, school does not matter. Why do we give a shit about who's the centre of gossip? I mean, I do think that's just mostly Bella's ego problem. And two, like, why are faculty members swooning over Edward and doing like whatever he wants and giving him favours. Like, two problems with that. One, he's quite possibly still a child. He's either 17 or 18. Like, for their record's sake, he would either be 17 or 18. One of those cases, he's still a fucking child. And even if he is a legal adult, even if he is 18, he's a fucking student at the school where you are an administrator. That's nonce behaviour, you fucking freak. Now, when I say that everybody has given her gifts, I do mean everyone, because she finds out, I believe, from Alice, actually, not from having seen the gifts from her parents. But yeah, she's got gifts from her parents. Now, I can half understand that. A lot of parents kind of just go, well, it's your birthday, so it's something I should do, and it's a big birthday because she's turning 18. Is there a cat on my leg? No, it's a slipper. But there is now a cat on my leg. Hello, she's now sat on me. Hello.
And now, a short lily purring break.
Where you going, babe? Do you want to sit on there? Right. Is that what we're doing? This is what we've got then. Yeah, so she's found out she's got gifts of her parents, and like, yeah, like I say, I can half understand the idea of parents going, but we want to get you gifts on a big day. But also she said no, like everybody versus giving Bella autonomy, especially the especially the Cullens. Fucking state of this. The fact that she's centre of shot as well, because of course she is. It is what you deserve though, isn't it, babe? You want to say hi to everybody? Have you not got anything to say? Doesn't seem to have much to say today. If it was Zelda, she probably would. She'd be probably like nose up to the mic trying to give it a good sniff. But this one's just content to perch. Are you lying down? That's not why I rested my hand like that. Okay.
No quote on screen this time because we do not cut Lily's screen time like that.
I'd never had much money, and that had never bothered me. Renee had raised me on a kindergarten teacher's salary. Charlie wasn't getting rich at his job either. My only personal income came from the 3 days a week I worked at a local sporting goods store. In a town this small, I was lucky to have a job. Every penny I made went into my microscopic college fund. Edward had a lot of money. I didn't even want to think about how much. Money means next to nothing to Edward or the rest of the Cullens. It was just something that accumulated when you had unlimited time on your hands and a sister who has an uncanny ability to predict trends in the stock market. Edward didn't seem to understand why I objected to him spending money on me, why it made me so uncomfortable if he took me to an expensive restaurant in Seattle, why he wasn't allowed to buy me a car, or why I wouldn't let him pay my college tuition. Edward thought I was being unnecessarily difficult. Now, so many romance books have this, where we have a main character, usually the female lead, who is like, I don't want my partner to buy me things. Usually when there is a power play involved, where, well, obviously where one is rich, but usually where there is a power play of some form, not necessarily just including money. And some books are better at others at explaining the fact that it's like, you are making me feel cheap. And we see it in 50 Shades of Grey, but it's not really explained well enough, and not in like a, because this is a little bit more telling over showing, but that is okay in books for a slightly younger reader. You know, you're at that point where you're maybe figuring yourself out, and you might be figuring out that you're maybe not inclined to have somebody spending money on you like that. I think that's fine. But in a lot of adult romance, and I don't just mean adult in the sort of 50 Shades of Grey kind of way, I just mean books for adults, it's, like I say, it's explained in some places better than others. Oh, where are you going? Oh, my neck. And in this case, it's not just the fact that he makes her feel cheap. And I think he knows that, because while he can't read her thoughts, he's got to be able to figure out from people around him that the way he treats her is making her feel cheap. And also consider that he has to be aware that she has this really big fear about aging, and every gift she gets feels to her like a kind of memento mori, you know, because to her, the older she gets, the closer she gets to death, and the closer she gets to not having the life she wants with Edward as a vampire. Now, after school and before they head to the party, Bella and Edward head to Bella's place, and they're there to watch Romeo and Juliet. It's for an English class project, and Edward basically is just like, God, I'm so jealous of Romeo. And Bella's just like, oh my God, yeah, like Juliet, she's so, and he's like, no, it's nothing to do with the girl. I'm jealous of him because he can fucking die, and he can do it by himself. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. It is also during this scene we first really learn of the Volturi, or hear about them again. I can't quite remember if we... Lily, you can't... Your choice is sitting up on my... How's that? Well, for a cat who doesn't usually like to be held, this is what she's doing. Can you go somewhere? Are you turning round? Because you did last time. No, you're leaving. So it's during this scene where we either first learn or relearn of the Volturi. I can't remember if during one of the scenes where we're learning of Carlisle's history in book 1, we learn about them. I think so, because I'm pretty sure the name Arrow or Arrow, I'm pretty sure it's Arrow, gets brought up in book 1, but off the top of my head, I can't quite remember. And as I've mentioned, I didn't reread Twilight or go over it via the book. I went through a Spark Notes thing and added things that I remembered. I think for 50 Shades, though, I don't think that sort of thing would exist, because it's a book for adults that's not really going to be studied, so I'm probably going to have to like borrow them from the library or see if I can find them in charity shops, because I don't mind getting them secondhand. That's how I've just got 50 Shades freed, actually. But anyway, we'll get to that later. So the Volturi are basically like the vampiric royal family. They are also the lawmakers and keepers. They are the reason for sort of vampires living the way they do, whether they are like human feeders or animal feeders. There are still laws to abide by. The biggest one is basically, don't let us be found out. Now listen, I've seen reviewers, even reviewers that I like, saying that Bella should be grateful for the fact that Alice put a lot of effort into this birthday party. I cannot agree with that, because It's another point of, like, Bella doesn't have any fucking autonomy, especially really early on in this. Like, around the vampires in general, but early on it's really clear the stuff surrounding her birthday. Like, she did not want to celebrate her birthday. She did not want this party. I don't give a shit if you booked out the entire fucking, I don't know, Sydney Opera House and then decided to get her favourite band, Linkin Park, to play there for her, and it's just for her and her alone. I don't care if you did all that. She didn't ask. She did not want to celebrate. She did not want to have a party. Why can't you just respect that? I don't even like Bella, but I think you should respect it. Respecting people's boundaries. Like, fuck. And it is at this party where Bella is opening a gift that obviously she didn't fucking want. But anyway, she's opening a gift and she gets a paper cut. And Jasper sees this and goes fucking hog wild. He's like, I'm gonna have to fucking drink her dry. And it's all over a fucking paper cut. And so obviously he like makes a beeline for her and everyone's like, we're going to have to get this separated. So Bella ends up being flung and she goes through a glass table, which objectively is quite funny that a simple paper cut ended up with her being like, okay, right lads, didn't expect this one. Also, by the way, none of this would have happened if you gave a shit about her enough to respect her boundaries, just saying.
We had a footage corruption issue that I don't have time to fix. Thankfully I still have audio. So I'll put some fun stock footage until we get it back. This is all with my phone doing that weird thing where it separates long videos. Hopefully nothing later is like this. We have a little bit where I'm still visible, but that's about it.
Chapter 2. Stitches. Now, of course, Bella needs fixing up. So, Dr. Carlisle Cullen is the one to just fix her up, make sure she's got any stitches, she's disinfected, all that nonsense. She's fixed up. And why is it that every time we get these little snippets of Carlisle's history, I go, I'd rather be reading that book? I mean, actually, if I recall from having watched the movies and seeing stories there, a lot of the times when we see other people's history, it's more interesting than the romance that we're given. And I don't know if that's one of those things where I go, I'm an adult now, so reading teen romance in particular just isn't, like, working for me to keep me interested. Or if it's a case of Meyer writes better things when she's not writing a romance with or writing something with any form of romantic element to it at all. Also, and this will come up later, but I feel like it's such a fucking red flag that Bella has to keep hiding where her injuries come from. She's never able to tell the truth about it. Look back to book 1 where it's like she fell down 2 flights of stairs and fell through a fucking window, which is the cover-up they use for the James attack. And here we have her like being patched up and she's going, oh my god, I don't know how I'm going to explain this to my dad. And it's like, you know the connotations of that, Meyer, right? Like the connotations of a girl who cannot hang out with a man without going home covered in injuries, and she's just like, no, something else happened. It's not that, but it has connotations, like, especially given that, like, Edward does show these signs of emotional abuse with her, and it's just like, ah! Chapter 3, the end. Now, unsurprisingly, Bella wakes up feeling like shit. She then meets Edward so they can go to school together, and they're just going to class. We walked in silence, he shortening his stride to match mine, and I had to check with my friend if I was just having something wrong with my brain. No, that's just a grammatical fucking car crash. Edward is off with her all day, and she isn't really aware why. There was a horrible incident at that party, but that wasn't really anybody but Jasper's fault. And also, by the way, tracking back to this, how was Jasper at a high school? I know I'm not the only person to say that. I know basically everybody who reviews this book is like, how was this man at high school if a paper cut does him in? And I know there's the argument of like, but Bella's blood is different. I don't care, it's a fucking paper cut. She didn't fall through the glass table and then that happened. Because actually, I would understand that. You're in a room full of vampires, and even though they are all vegetarian vampires, some of them are newer to that lifestyle than others. I understand. And like, I think all of them would have like a moment when she goes through the table. But it's a paper cut that sets it off. Has nobody ever got a paper cut in a school? Has nobody ever fallen over and like hurt their knees playing sports or something? Like, use it. Noggin. Make it make sense. And he greets her when she gets home. And basically is like, yeah, can we go off into the middle of the woods so we can have a talk? Which again, red flag feeling situation. Like, maybe it's just me, but if someone was like, hey, let's walk off to the middle of the woods in the night so we can have a chat. And I'm like, I'm calling the cops. No, thank you. Please come nowhere near me. And while they're in the woods, he's basically like, we're all leaving. Not you, just me and the rest of the Cullens. And actually, turns out, I don't love you. And maybe I never loved you. Soz. And then he fucks off and just leaves her in the middle of the woods. But before that, we get this. No, this is about my soul, isn't it? I shouted, furious, the words exploding out of me. Somehow it still seemed like a plea. Carlisle told me about that. And I don't care, Edward. I don't care. You can have my soul. I don't want it without you. It's yours already. 1, cringe. 2, yeah, while Carlisle was patching her up earlier, basically we get the explanation of like the biggest part of the reason he doesn't want to turn her, and a lot of it is kind of similar reasons to why Rosalie is like, I don't understand why you want to get turned, because you still have humanity. Why would you want to give that up? But part of it is that Edward basically sees being turned into a vampire as an immediate damnation of the soul. You are an aberration if you get turned. You have no other option. When you die, you don't get to go to the good place.
And then Canva wouldn't download anything anymore. I am just going to have a lie down and a cry. Help.
But like I said, yeah, they have this conversation, there's back and forth. He's like, I don't love you, maybe I never loved you anyway. And then he's like, see ya, leaves her alone in the middle of the cold, damp woods. And it's dark, it's fucking pitch black, it's the middle of the night. But no, fuck her. Just leave her there, it'll be right. And it's like, I kind of actually understand the overkill breakup. Even if it's a dick move, it probably makes sense to him. And it's a sort of thing where I go, you're really trying to make sure she hates you so she can move on more easily. It doesn't actually work, but to him I imagine that does make sense. But just the leaving her alone, I'm like, could you not walk her back to her house at least? Now, the end of that chapter is 4 half blank pages. There is one word written on each page. We have October, November, December, and January. Now, I love it. I think it works really well. It says everything while saying nothing. It shows that Meyer can do a bit of subtlety, because we read everything from Bella's POV. Like, it's almost diary entry-esque. Just, I think, clearly not from right in the moment, but it does feel like it's coming from not so much further on, because there's so much detail. And it just tells you everything you need to know of. There is nothing in those months that still lives in her brain.
Like I said, Canva wasn't being nice to me, so I've had to save this as a ping. No moving text.
Chapter 4, Waking Up. And what those 4 months are, like I said, they are basically Bella's depressive state. She is now kind of half getting out of it. She's still kind of zombified, but she's awake more often than not. She's responsive to people talking to her. That just didn't happen in those 4 months. Now, she starts going back to school again, and we have a bit of a tricky situation here because she says that Jess is basically a tad sour. Now, I'll be calling her Jess and Jessica throughout because I'm pretty sure she is called both throughout. Like I say, she's called a tad sour. I'm like, yeah, she might be. Now, obviously, you want Bella to be able to go back to being within her friendship group, but there still has to be a bit of awareness from her that she's been gone for 4 months. She's not going to be able to necessarily walk back into that group and find herself in exactly the same state, like exactly the same way to fit into the group as she was before. Also, consider that the last time she was there, she was always with Edward and Alice, and they kind of sat on the edge of the group, only half talking to anybody. There's no way she would have been able to just pop right back in and it would have been like right like it was in book 1. It wasn't going to work like that. But I understand where her disappointment comes from. Partly to, actually get some normality back, and also partly to please Charlie, because he's like, I really want you to go out and do some fucking normal things. She talks to Jess and arranges for the two of them to go to the cinema together. Now, a little part of this is about the fact that Bella is starting to get this thing with just wanting adrenaline, and that becomes way more important later on in this scene, but you see it because they see this like super gory, scary, like zombie film. But afterwards, basically, the two of them were walking down the street, and outside one of the bars, Bella sees this biker gang, and she gets it in her head that they were the same group. The last time they were in Port Angeles, because that's where the cinema is, like, obviously the last time she was there, she was jumped by this group of guys, and she gets it in her head that one or all of this group are the people that went for her last time when Edward rescued her. And as she just for some reason thinks, I'm going to start to approach them. And as she does, she hears Edward's voice in the back of her head being like, what are you doing? But she's hearing him for the first time in 4+ months. And she's now like, well, if I'm going to hear him. And this basically kicks off a whole story of her going, if I can just get adrenaline in me, maybe I'll hear him again. I wondered if there was any way I would recognise the man, if it was really him. That particular part of that particular evening was just a blur. My body remembered it better than my mind did. The tension in my legs as I tried to decide whether to run or to stand my ground. The dryness in my throat as I struggled to build a decent scream. The tight stretch of skin across my knuckles as I clenched my hands into fists. The chills on the back of my neck when the dark-haired man called me sugar. And this is what I'm talking about when I say that Meyer knows how to write like creepy shit, horror shit, adrenaline fueled shit. She knows how to do that, and I just wish we had more of it. We do get more of it in this book, I think, from what I can remember. We do get more of it in this book than we did in the last one, or at the very least it's just because obviously a lot of horror stuff is adrenaline fueled, and a lot of this book is based around adrenaline Bella being a bit of like an adrenaline seeker. Jessica was not cooperative. I must have really offended her. Yeah. You did. So when Bella's fucking off to go and see this, like, group of bikers who might have attacked her at some point, bear in mind Jess does know she was attacked. She didn't see it, but she knows, because when, like, Edward takes Bella back, I'm so certain that she explains what happened. And Bella's just like, toodle pip, like fucking Edward did in the middle of the woods. I mean, fucking maybe they are good for each other, but, like, she just leaves her in the road and it's like, oh, I must have really offended her. Like, yeah, of course she fucking did. Chapter 5, Cheetah. This is frankly a bit of a non-chapter overall, but it is where we see that Bella and Jake decide to fix up some bikes together.
Chapter 6, Friends.
Bella and I are going to fix up these bikes, Jacob explained inaccurately, but bikes seem to be the magic word. Both boys went to examine Jacob's project, drilling him with educated questions. Many of the words they used were unfamiliar to me, and I figured I'd have to have a Y chromosome to understand the excitement. Now, I'm going to have to just, like, check my notes here, but I'm not sure where in your chromosomes liking bikes is. Now listen, my attendance wasn't great at school. Maybe I just missed that biology class, but I feel like I'd have heard that at some point. You know what I mean? Later that day, there's a huge amount of people all having dinner at Jacob and Billy Black's house. While there, we meet Harry and Sue Clearwater. These are people who are very old friends of Charlie's. Now, they're not super important now, but they do come up later, and it's during this scene where Sue is basically telling Harry to watch his cholesterol and, like, you've got to look after yourself a little bit, and that comes up later. We also get this description of Sue. She was beautiful in an exotic way. She could have just said beautiful, left it at that. There's something about the word exotic and the fact that it's used for a non-white person, because I always feel like exotic is one of those things where it's like white people use it to mean foreign, and it's just like, and I am aware that obviously she's Native American, she's not foreign, but it's used to mean you're pretty in a not white way. Oh, stop it. It's in this chapter that we really start to see this friendship between Bella and, I nearly said Edward, and Jacob Bloom. But it's also really clear that Bella's basically just using him to get over her ex, and Jacob's just like, I'll hang around because maybe one day you'll love me. As if that's normal. Can everybody get a little bit of self-respect, please? Now, once she's back at school, she's just talking about people in general, and look, Lauren is a non-character from book 1. She is mentioned briefly because she kind of gets in a bit of a huff that Bella is seeing Edward, but for some reason we get this kind of in-depth description of what she looks like now, as if I give a shit. But anyway, I barely recognise Lauren. She cut off all her blonde corn silk hair. Now she had a pixie cut so short the back was shaved like a boy. What an odd thing for her to do. I wished I knew the reason behind it. Did she get gum stuck in it? Did she sell it? Had all the people she was habitually nasty to caught her behind the gym and scalped her? I decided it wasn't fair for me to judge her now by my former opinion. For all I knew, she turned into a nicer person. A few things to unpack here. Firstly, anybody can have their hair shaved, it's not gendered. If it's a pixie cut, it might be shaved. That's not like a boy if it's on a girl. And also, like, you've got a very vivid imagination, Bella. Like, what business of it? What business is it of yours why she shaved her head? And like I say, you've got a very vivid imagination. She probably just felt like a change. And finally, Bella, instead of wondering, has Lauren become a good person? Try doing that for your fucking self.
And then Canva worked again. I could go back and change things, but I think everyone deserves to go on the journey with me.
Chapter 7. Repetition. Bella goes to the Cullens' empty house, sort of an act of masochism. I think she's also half expecting to hear Edward's voice, but she doesn't. And honestly, this is kind of one of those chapters where it's just like, we gotta move it's a very practical chapter. It's mostly there to move the plot forward, apart from with the little going to Cullen's house thing. I think that could have honestly been done with being cut, but on the whole, this is just a chapter that's like, it's getting us from point A to point B, but it's generally unforgettable. Sorry, it is generally forgettable. But the important thing from it is that by the end of it, we have found that the bikes have been finished. Chapter 8. Adrenaline in my soul. Now, obviously, the bikes are finished, so it's time to take them for a spin. Now, look, I know that the answer is that this is a poorly written book for teenagers who don't know any better, but like, if Edward is basically an addict for Bella because of the way he sees her blood, and Bella is basically seeking adrenaline because it's the only connection she can currently find to Edward because she hears his voice, so it's basically like seeking a hit for her. Is that not just codependency? Like, they are literally dependent on each other, but in a way that if they're apart, they can't live without each other. Because while we don't know that Edward right now is whether or not he's going through it, we can see his actions later where he's like, oh my god, she's died, so I have to. It's not a spoiler alert, we're going through the entire fucking plot. But like, is that not just codependency? Why am I meant to be like, yes, this is what I want for myself? Ah, yes. I want somebody who craves me in a way that they die without me. Again, like I say, I know that's because this is a book for teenagers whose emotions run very, very high. And they don't necessarily know any better. But is this the lesson we want to teach them? Now, because it's Bella, obviously she falls off a bike the first time she rides it and she injures herself. I think she hits her head as well. Thankfully, at least, she's not concussed. Thankfully, I don't know. Maybe she got a proper injury. The book might have finished earlier. Now, firstly, maybe Edward should just turn her like as soon as possible, because then she just can't fucking injure herself. Like, it would take a miracle for her, or like the opposite of a miracle, I guess. A badical for her to get injured at that point. Also, once again, Bella can't tell her dad why she's been injured. And like I say, I know it's not like exactly the men in her life. Like, it's not her boyfriend or her close male friends. It's not those men who are acting. You can see Lily's head bobbing. She's cleaning her tummy area, or like her chest here. She's cleaning her chest, so you might just see her head, little head bobbing up and down. Such a little cutie. Like I say, I know that the men aren't actively the ones hurting her and she's lying about that, but it's connotations. She can never tell the truth about her injuries. I don't like it. Also, right, I hadn't mentioned earlier, but basically, there's been some issues going on that within the woods there's been some bear attacks, or what look like bear attacks. So we end up having to get this because of that. Which is Jacob saying the first line, by the way. Well, it's him saying the dialogue, and you understand. Bears don't want to eat people. We don't taste that good. He grinned at me in the dark cab. of course, you might be an exception. I bet you taste good. Chapter 9, Third Wheel. So, Bella actually trying to be proactive, but also it's probably just so she can see some horror movies, so she can get some adrenaline and maybe see Edward again. Oh, he had Edward in her head, how wonderful. Yay. There's nothing wrong with her. She doesn't need a therapist, we swear. Anyhow, she tries to run another cinema trip, but with a group of people this time. Obviously, Jess doesn't want to go, but it looks like she is going to have a group at first, but then a bunch of people start pulling out, a couple of them because of flu, and she's left with Jacob, who is, like, as we've discussed, actually a wet flannel of a man, because he's all like, oh my god, I'll wait forever for you, and then maybe you'll love me one day the way I love you. And she's also left with Mike. We have issues with anybody called Mike on this channel, apparently. That bowl is not for kittens. That's a good girl. Yeah, we have an issue with Mike's on this channel, but he's like also a fucking wet flannel of a man, because he's also got a bit of like a maybe one day complex, and has done, because he was like, he asked her to the dance in the last book, even though it was meant to be girls asking the guys type thing. Doesn't fucking matter to him, doesn't matter to Mike, because like I say, all Mikes are trash. If you know a Mike, get rid of him. Trash. For legal purposes, that's a joke, but like, she's left with two absolute wet limp men who make me go, Bella, please just get some standards. And that's not just for relationships. Standards work with friends as well. Just get some self-respect. And after the movie, both guys start to feel really ill, and Bella does get a bit sick as well, but like, it's clear that at the cinema Mike falls sick really quickly, and then later on Jacob does as well. And while Mike's away throwing up in the bathroom, we get this. How was I going to fight the blurring lines in our relationship when I enjoyed being with him so much? I repeat, get some self-respect, and also get a therapist. Deal with your issues. That's how you can deal with that. Stop, like, what's the word? Rebound. This is a rebound. And I know they're not actually in a relationship, but she's treating it like one. And she is using this as a rebound. Like, go. Self-respect. Gain some. When Bella gets home, because like I said, at this point, Jacob's also sick. She waits for a little while, but she's like, okay, I've not got a call, because Jacob was meant to call her when he got home. She phones them. She phones their residence, and Billy answers it, his dad. And he's like, yeah, no, he's sick, but it's fine. You don't have to come up. Don't help. Don't come out. He's really off with her. He's like, yes, he's sick. No, you don't have to come up. You're fine.
Bye-bye, bitch.
Chapter 10, The Meadow. Now, Jacob doesn't call her with any updates, as he said that he was going to, and also, when she does try to call, Billy is refusing to give her any updates. I'm like, it really quickly becomes clear that it's not the flu that they originally thought it was, because, like I said, Bella gets sick, but she clears up from it pretty quickly within a few days. Same with Mike. And at some point they say it's mono, but I don't really know what mono is. And then it's just like, I understand wanting to keep the full truth from your reader as well as Bella, but logically it doesn't make sense, because even if Jacob doesn't yet know that Bella is aware of what the Cullens are, and he's had it confirmed what the Cullens are. Sorry if you can hear my bother, I'm not stopping filming now. It's like we're an hour and 20 in terms of editing. God knows what we'll be at when this gets here with editing. But for me, I'm an hour and 20 in. I'm not stopping now. I want to get this finished. But, like, Jacob told her the Cold One's myth. And whether he believed it or not at the time, it's going to very quickly become clear to him that it's true. And Billy knew it was true. He already believed it back in book 1. So I'm also pretty sure that Billy was responsible for telling her, for making sure she was told the Cold One's myth. And like I was saying the other day, by that final time he's going, do not talk to Edward, it seems like he is like, I know you know, and you just don't give a shit. That's on you now.
Bye-bye, bitch.
So why can't she know? Or why can't it be a case of, look, he is sick right now, give it a week, whatever, however long, and we'll sit down and explain this to you. Because they know she can keep a secret. She's kept the Cullens secret for this long. She's never told anybody. Why can't she know? I don't get it. Now, Bella, because she can't hang out with Jacob every day, she's like, alright, I'm going to have to figure out what to do with my time. And she's like, well, I can't hang out with Jessica because she's turned to the dark side. Whatever that fucking means. It's like, she hasn't turned to the dark side, Bella. You were a shit friend. Figure your life out. But obviously she's like, well, still need something to do. So she fucks off to the meadow, the same one where she first met Edward, first saw him sparkling and from the dream at the beginning of the book. And while there, she sees Laurent. Now, in the last book, there was the trio of vampires that interrupted vampire baseball. There was James, he was the hunter, the one that gets killed by the end of the book. There's Victoria. Victoria was his mate. And there is Laurent. He's kind of the other one. Somewhat less important, but he works as a messenger here. Now, first of all, Bella needs to get a grip because he says, oh, Bella Swan or whatever. Like, he says her name, I believe her full name as well. And she's like, oh my god, a vampire remembered my name. Go get a grip. You've been hearing a mystical fucking supernatural being in your head for what, weeks, let's call it now, because time is a bit tricky in these books. It's not always clear how much time has passed, apart from in the 4-month period, obviously. But have you considered getting a grip? It's just a vampire remembering your name. Like I say, zero self-respect on this girl. And also just like, obviously he remembers your name. One of his, like, I'll say coven. I don't know if that's the word they use, but I believe so. It's like, one of his coven was hunted down by the vampires protecting you. But basically what he's there to say... Is there a kitten here again? Yes, hello. Basically, what he's there to say is that Victoria's after her because her mate was killed and she's off in an eye for an eye situation. Because, well, it's like mate for mate, but it's the phrase that's used. But, like, yeah, that's what eye for an eye actually means, apparently. Hello. I didn't know that. I thought eye for an eye was literally, it's like, if you kill my husband, I kill you. But it's actually like, if you kill my husband, I kill your husband. That's what eye for an eye actually is referring to. I'm not well versed in any kind of biblical studies or anything like that. I haven't really done much more than look at a Bible since I was in primary school, quite frankly. But this little reunion party doesn't last too long because a group of giant fuck off wolves turn up. And we're not just talking like wolves are big, but these are like big wolves. They're like bears. I mean, at one point, the term like as big as houses is used to describe these creatures, but at another point, the word horses is used. So I don't know if the horses was meant to be houses or the houses was meant to be horses, or if it's just that she doesn't give a shit about consistency. Honestly, could be any of them. But point is, big fuck off will show up. They're like bears, like grizzlies or whatever, like big bears. I don't know what big bears are. Grizzlies, black bears, whatever, cocaine bears, all of that shit, right? That'll age this very nicely. I haven't seen Cocaine Bear. I don't know if it's actually out yet, but I think it's out soon if it's not out already. And yes, I do want to see it because it looks fucking ridiculous. Anyway, big wolves show up and they clear Laurent out. And also, Miss Bella sees one of the wolves, and for some reason, in her head, she pictures Jacob. What could this mean? I do wonder. It's not like at all like when she thought of vampires and immediately thought of Edward, and she connected those dots so quickly. It's not like she has a weird premonition kind of thing about her, even though it's not really a superpower. Chapter 11. Cult. Given her run-in with the wolves and the fact that she now knows that she's being hunted, also obviously then putting Charlie in danger, Bella's like, you know, a little bit on edge. And then consider that she is in the mental state, well, she not quite, but she is nearly spiraling in the same way that she did when Edward left, because she's really missing Jacob. So yeah, she still doesn't have a therapist. She never gets one, but she should consider it. Just like, let's try it out, you know, little 30-day money back guarantee or something. I know that's not how therapists work. I know I've only ever had ones on the NHS, but like, trust me, I know that's not how they work. I'm not a complete fucking idiot. But because she is missing Edward, she's also missing him. But because she is missing Jacob, after a while of like fretting, going back and forth on it, she goes, you know what, fuck it, and drives to La Push. And when she pulls up, Jacob basically accosts her outside her car, and he's just like, what the fuck are you doing here? But he also looks completely different. He is taller. He's got way more muscle mass on him. But most importantly, he has cut all of his hair off. Now, I am not an expert on this. I have not done research on this. I am just tracking back to, I swear I've heard this once sort of thing. But I swear that I've heard that many Native Americans have some kind of connection to their hair that is deeply culturally significant, shall we say. Now, I can't say this for certain, but Meyer should have done a research properly, given that, you know, she's writing a book where Native Americans feature very heavily. I feel like cutting hair off, I feel like that's gonna mean something. And I say this as well because I don't think I've ever seen a Native American with short hair, ever. I've only ever seen Native Americans with really long hair. I feel like this is one of Mayer's moments here, but like I say, I'm not an expert, and please do not take my word as gospel. Do your own research in your own time type thing, right? But it is in this scene where we get a lot of back and forth between Bella and Jacob, where it's basically like, tell me what's wrong. I can't tell you what's wrong. Why? I just can't. And then it's like, this is about Sam Yulee and his cult, isn't it? And it's like, no, it's not. Actually, Sam's a really nice guy. And this goes on for a bit until at some point Jacob storms off and Billy comes out and is like, Charlie said it's time to come home. Oh, and also, I didn't mention earlier, but prior to this, while Jacob and Bella have been hanging out during normal times, Jacob's basically been like, yeah, something's weird with Samueli. There's been a few guys on the reservation that seem to be like gathering around him, and it's got like weird cultish behaviour. So obviously Bella's going to believe that. And like I say, I still don't really think it makes any sense as to why Bella can't know. If the rules are basically that the werewolves are here because there's a vampire problem, and the werewolves exist, like their entire existence is protect the local area from these vampires, and they know that Bella has vampire knowledge, surely she can be helpful. I mean, they do get to that later on, they come to that realization, but it's density, that's what it is. But when Bella gets home, she explains her fears to Charlie, and I really like this moment because Charlie actually confronts his friend. He calls Billy and confronts him about it, and it's a genuine confrontation as well. It's not a bit of a telling off. Like, he genuinely stands up for it. And the thing is, Charlie's kind of bumbling, and not always in a sort of endearing kind of way when it comes to fatherhood, but I like scenes like this because it's not full on, if you go near my daughter I'll get the shotgun type stuff, which it could so easily be, but there is clear level of love and protection. He just doesn't always know how to show it, and I think this is just a really good scene that encompasses that. We see it later on as well. It's not particularly part of the review, but there's a point where Charlie and Alice are talking, and he's just talking to Alice about the fact that he's like, I don't want Edward in her life again, because the last time he was here and then he left, I can't explain to you how bad the state she was in. And it's so clear that there's just so much love and protection and care in his heart for her, but she's a shit daughter. Like, this scene doesn't show that, but we will get to that later on. She's not a good daughter. She's a good little trad wife, like she cooks for him and all that, but in terms of actually giving a shit as a daughter, no. Chapter 12, Intruder.
We have an intruder!
How did he get in? In through the window?
Now, because Bella can't catch a break from people climbing into her bedroom despite the fact she didn't ask them to, Jacob does this and comes into her window. Now, it's a bit less, I like to watch you sleep than it was with Edward, but he's still just like, I have the right to be in your room, let me in, even though he could just come in the front door. And, like, actually, I understand why he doesn't just walk in the front door, because, one, it's at night, and two, there's the idea that Charlie would, like, that would get back to his dad, and he's not supposed to be there. So I do understand that. But, at the same time, stop breaking in. Throw rocks at the window. Do, like, the old thing of, like, just throwing some rocks there, and, like, she goes, ooh, who is it? It's like, oh, yeah, quick, like, get in. Rather than just, like, climbing up and, like, being at the window, like, hello. Hello, let me in. Can I zoom in like this? Yeah. Yeah, I can. Let me in. Yeah. I'm in your window. Let me in. This is much more horrifying now that I don't have eyebrows, isn't it? I'm outside your window. Let me in. I could be your little wolf boyfriend. Let me in. But basically, he's still like, I can't explain this to you exactly, but all I'll say is try to remember the Cold Ones myth that I told you back when we first met each other at La Push, when you first arrived in Forks. Try to remember that, and remember it beyond the vampires, because, and I do actually quite like this, the thought process makes sense right from the start. It is, from what I recall, over-explained a bit later on, but he's basically like, but the premise is basically, I am explaining to you, remember this, because if you come to me and say, oh, I understand what's going on, rather than me explaining it to you, it's different because you figured it out. Didn't you? I didn't tell you. No, you figured it out. It makes sense, and I like it. It works. And yes, I'm aware that it is a bit of a bold plan, given that Bella's kind of dense, to expect her to figure things out on her own. But in the end, she is in her dreams that night, and it all begins to make sense to her. And she once again sees the sort of wolf thing, like the giant bear-sized wolf that she saw back at the meadow, and it clicks, and it's like, oh, that's why I thought of Jacob. It is him. He's a fucking giant wolf man. What kind of place was this? Could a world really exist where ancient legends went wandering around the borders of tiny, insignificant towns, facing down mythical monsters? Did this mean every impossible fairy tale was grounded somewhere in absolute truth? Was there anything sane or normal at all, or was everything just magic and ghost stories? Ma'am, you have been trying to get your back blown out by a vampire for what, like a year and a half now? But suddenly, because you find out other creatures are there, it's like, it's all too much. What's going to happen? Because bear in mind, when she first found out vampires exist, she was like, yeah, seems about right, but anything else existing, it's all too much. Oh, how will I deal with it? Same way up with the vampires, dickhead. Like, get over it. Like, if she had been this flustered about vampires, and now she was like, oh my god, there's more. Wait, I could get my head around vampires, but now there's more as well. Because she says that just after this. I can't remember the exact quote because I didn't write it down. But she's like, I can deal with the fact there's vampires, but I can't deal with the fact there's any more. Like, why? Why? Ah! Of course there's more. Why wouldn't there be? That's the thing. I think that's what annoys me. Why wouldn't there be more? Chapter 13. Killer. Now, when Jacob was, like, going in through a window, during that conversation, she agreed to a phone call about basically whether or not she still wanted to talk to him when she figured it out. She actually, and I think she's right for this, decides actually the best thing to do is have a face-to-face conversation. So she heads to the push. Now, like I said this earlier, there were some issues with animal attacks, and obviously now that she's aware of the wolves, she's putting two and two together. It does look like they're the problem, but Jacob is still right for calling her a hypocrite, because she's like, oh my god, help me, I'm so scared because of these wolves. But she didn't give a shit about the vampires, and she wasn't this actively frightened when James was hunting her. She was not this actively frightened about herself, about Victoria. I understand being more scared for your family than yourself, it makes sense. And she also probably has a thing in the back of her head that's like, but maybe she won't kill me. Maybe she'll turn me. Tee-hee-hee. Like, no, she'd drain you dry, and you would basically look like a fucking raisin or a prune. But listen, she's a fucking idiot. I understand this, but like I say, Jacob's right to call her a hypocrite on this one, because she's like, Dee vampires are like so hot and sexy, and like I love them so much. Wolves, terrifying beasts, disgusting. But Bella actually confronts Jacob about these animal attacks that have been going on. It makes sense for her to, at least, like, if she's going to be a hypocrite, she's like, go whole hog on it and get that peace of mind going, well, why shouldn't I be scared? You lot have been attacking people. And he's like, what the fuck are you talking about? These are vampire attacks. We are hunting vampires. We've just been too late. Bear in mind how fast the vampires are. And obviously the wolves are fast as well, but they're still like big hulking dogs. They move like big hulking dogs, even with some speed on them. The vampires do that like flitting thing where they like whiz about. However, after the situation in the meadow, they did get Laurent. Like, Laurent is fucked. Dead. He ain't causing any more problems. It's going to be Victoria now that is causing these problems. And, given that, she explains that situation to him. Chapter 14. Family. So, Bella's basically taken to the woods to go talk to Sam Yulee and the rest of the group, because they've basically gone, oh yeah, she's useful because she has knowledge. Take your fucking time. Now, given that she does have a close relationship with vampires, it is still controversial within the group, and this kind of results in a wolf fight between one of the guys in the group and Jacob. 1 second it was Jacob diving into the air, and then it was the gigantic russet brown wolf, so enormous that I couldn't make sense of its mass, somehow fitting into Jacob. Me and my werewolf boyfriend. Chapter 15. Pressure. Given that it's spring break and Bella does need protection, she basically just spends all of her time at La Push now, and, well, while she's been there, she sees some people cliff diving. And at first, obviously, she's like, what the fuck is going on? Oh my god, these people are gonna, like, fucking kill themselves. But Jacob is like, babes, calm down. Don't worry, they're doing it for recreational purposes. They're just cliff diving. It's an adrenaline thing. And Bella's like, adrenaline in my soul! At some point, but the weather's not great at the minute, and they're more experienced than you or I. But eventually she gets tired of waiting for Jacob to take her to do this, so she just goes. And this is despite the fact that there is a storm brewing. She's just not thinking at all. And as she gets closer to the edge of the cliff, unsurprisingly, there's Edward's voice in the back of their head, but it's different this time. It's not controlling as it has been before. So previously, it's been the Edward voice that we would expect. It's very, do not do this, stop. Like, it's very final. It's very, he is in control. But you can see that his control is, like, loosening a bit here. And it's clear that he's still trying. He's just, like, pleading a lot more, and I really like that, especially because then once she hits the water and she's getting this close to just letting it take her, you can see him going, I have to switch that back on again. I can't be passive and pleading and meek with her. I have to be like, you need to fight, you need to push yourself, you need to get to the top of the water. But she does nearly let herself get taken. Chapter 16. Paris. But for better or for worse, she is rescued. She is sorted out. She is water free from her system beyond the shit that's supposed to be in there. Like I was saying, from the moment she steps foot on that cliff to the moment she is pulled out of it, and like she's got all this like disorientation going on because obviously she's just been resuscitated. Like I was saying earlier, it's just these adrenaline-fueled scenes. From the moment she's on the cliff to that moment of disorientation because she's waking up, it's so good. It's genuinely really good, and I just wish that Meyer focused on that side of her writing. And obviously, I don't want every single scene to be adrenaline-fueled and stuff like that, but I just find that everything she writes that isn't actually centered in romance. Now obviously the stuff with Edward in the back of her head, that is still centered in the romance, but it's not romantic. It's just about a relationship, as it were. It's not a romantic notion. It's not like buying somebody flowers, that's romantic. This is just like these two people are or were in a relationship. But point is, the stuff she writes that isn't romantic is often actually quite good. I wish we got to see more of it. But I think all of her stuff is young adult and teen fiction, which, like, I don't go, young people fiction, disgusting, I won't read that. I just know that I would imagine there is romance featured in all of her stuff, given the prevalence of it in here, and I don't really care about teen and young adult romance. I feel too old for it most of the time, even if it's written well. But on the journey home, as Jacob is driving her, Bella sees Carlisle's, as in Carlisle Cullen. She sees his Mercedes and she goes hog fucking wild. And she is an arsehole in this moment, by the way. I do not blame Jacob for him basically being like, girl, you're being a dick. Like, I don't give a shit that they're your vampires. No, I'm driving you home. And she's like, stop this fucking car. Turn it a fucking round. I want to see my vampires. Because yes, I think you're great, Jacob. But my supernatural beings are here. You hear me? My supernatural beings. Mine. I need to see them. Chapter 17. Visitor. Now, yes, it is Carlisle's car. But it's actually Alice that's inside it. She thought Bella's cliff diving incident was an attempt on her life. Also, Alice shouldn't be able to see Bella because that's related to Bella's choices. This isn't just a sort of thing where like it's hazy, because the shit that she can't see very well is the moment she's pulled out, which implies that her visions are hazy when it comes to the wolves. But she shouldn't have been able to see the cliff dive because Bella's immune to vampire abilities, and surely that would include Alice. Plot holes. Also, Bella rats out Jacob and his boys for being werewolves immediately because she's a fucking snitch. Like, girl, you spent a year and a half being like, no, I would never rat out my vampires. And the werewolves are like, we can't tell Bella, just in case. And I've like defended this because if you go logically, she wouldn't tell anybody, because I don't think she would tell any other people. But the moment the vampires come back, her supernatural beings, fuck them. Yeah, I'll rat them out. Who gives a shit? But then Alice is all like, wolves? No, and young wolves at that. Don't you know young wolves are dangerous? Didn't your step-brother boyfriend like nearly kill Bella because she got a paper cut? And you're like, but these people you're hanging around with are dangerous. Get real. And once again, the Victoria situation is relayed. Don't worry, when you're reading it, it isn't fully relayed every time. It does more amount to, I explained this to this person, I explained this to that person. Now, at the end of this chapter, we learn that Harry Clearwater, the old friend of Charlie, has passed from heart failure. Obviously, this was foreshadowed somewhat earlier with the talk of cholesterol and him not looking after himself. And as this chapter is closing out, the doorbell rings. Chapter 18, the funeral. The person at the door is Jacob, and then there's just a dick swinging contest between him and Alice for a bit because, oh, we protect her better than you do, but we actually protect her better than you do, and grow up. But then at some point, the house phone rings, and like, Jacob is quick to pull audacity out of fucking somewhere because he decides that it's okay to answer somebody else's house phone. I mean, answer somebody else's phone in general when you haven't been given permission, but like, who said you could do that? But he answers the phone believing that the person on the other side is everybody's favourite DILF, Carlisle, and he's like, no, Charlie isn't here right now. He's at a funeral. Now, oh, whoopsie doodle, it wasn't actually Carlisle. It was Edward. And Edward's now like, oh, Charlie's at a funeral? Bella's dead. Now, thanks to Alice's sort of premonition superpowers, she's basically able to see that Edward is choosing to fuck himself up via the Volturi and basically go, well, I can't kill myself in any traditional human ways, but I can get the Volturi to do it for me, so that's what I'm gonna do. Now, because Bella is the world's shittest daughter, she basically leaves with next to no notice. Like, she leaves a 2 to 3 line note being like, buggering off to go rescue Edward. As if Charlie isn't at a funeral for his, like, one of his long-standing friends. Like, they've been friends for, what, like, decades? And Bella's like, you know how I was, like, in a really deep, dark, depressive state for, like, 4 months and you didn't know what to do with me and I didn't know what to do with myself? Well, do you remember why that happened? Because that guy left. I'm going away to go and rescue him from himself. Tee hee hee. Your Daughter of the fucking Year award goes to Bella fucking Swan. But at the end of this chapter, they are off to Italy. Chapter 19. Race. Now, on the plane to Italy, Alice basically says, actually, I have considered just, like, turning you into a vampire myself, save Edward the trouble. And Bella isn't desperate about it at all. She's not weird. Did I scare you? She wondered. I thought that's what you wanted. I do, I gasped. Oh, Alice, do it now. I could help you so much. And I wouldn't slow you down. Bite me. He doesn't reek of desperation at all. Now, the flight itself isn't actually particularly noteworthy beyond that moment with the two of them there. But when they land, it's basically a case of, well, we have to do a sonic compression because gotta go fast, but we can't really do a sonic compression because running isn't an option. It's too far of a distance. But Alice is just like, little bit of Grand Theft Auto is fine, and she steals a really, like, conspicuous, bright yellow, is it Porsche? I think it is. If that's not how you say that car, I don't care. I don't give a shit about cars. Porsche, whichever one. Correct me in the comments if you actually give a shit. Because I sure as hell fucking don't. I'm 2 hours into filming a video about New Moon. And you think I'm going to give a shit about the car names? Chapter 20. Volterra. This is objectively one of the best chapters in the book. So Edward's plan is to show himself in the sun, and obviously that's going to give himself away, but it's even bigger because, well, there's this huge festival going on at the minute, so there are hundreds, if not thousands of people within the city who are able to see him. So obviously the Volturi aren't going to be best pleased about this. As I was explaining earlier, one of the big rules is do not let us be revealed to the human world. So they wouldn't be best pleased about him being like, look at my big glittery body. Now, obviously, there's the argument of, well, would humans know about this? Because obviously Bella wasn't aware about the sparkling thing, but it's still a revelation that there is something other there, even if it's not vampires, right? So Bella's mission, as she has chosen to accept it, is to get out of the car, bolt across... I said bolt. Did that make you jump? You silly little baby. So she's got to bolt across the entire city, and she's got to get through all these crowds. She's got to run through a fountain at some point, and then you're going to choke yourself on the fucking wire, you idiot. All the way through the city, she's barreling through all of these different people, and she's got to go through a fountain, and somehow her general klutzy nature doesn't get to her. And even if sometimes it is really hard to root for these characters, because of the way that just this scene is written, there is a deep level of satisfaction where she finally gets to him at the end, because he's going to go out in midday where the sun's going to shine brightest at him, and you know that clock is ticking. He is near a huge clock tower, and she just makes it. And it is satisfying. Like, even though it is hard to care for these characters, that moment itself is really satisfying. It's just, again, more scenes like this, more prowess in writing like this. Chapter 21, Verdict. Now, while he didn't actually show himself, Edward is still in shit, quite obviously. So him, Bella and Alice have got to all go and chat to the Volturi. Now, in Edward's case, he's in trouble. In Alice's case, they want her to become part of the Volturi. She's got, obviously, an incredibly useful, like, ability. And, obviously, in Bella's case, she's a human. So they're like, can we have a little... No? Rude. But on the way there, they walk through the most boring ass corporate office type corridors, and I'm like, you're in Italy with some of the finest architecture, at the very least, if you don't want to say worldwide, some of the finest fucking architecture in Europe, and you're gonna be like, yeah, we're going to have some boring, cold-ass fucking corporate corridors. And then they get to the main hall, which is structurally, they've gone for the architecture, beautiful, but it's fucking boring as shit decor-wise. And I know I'm being picky here. I know I'm being like a pissy little bitch. But when you read of the Volturi themselves, they build this kind of expectation of being a kind of royalty or some kind of high standing governmental body. And I'm not expecting beautiful architecture that's entirely fucking bare, barring 3 chairs and a couple of paintings. I'm expecting Vatican. You're in Italy. There's no way there couldn't be some art that you've collected over the thousands of years that you've existed. Or maybe even if it's just hundreds of years. You've existed for so long. Like, there's no way you haven't collected some art. And even if it isn't a case of you've collected some rare art in terms of, oh, people didn't know where this had been, but this is where it's actually turned out, which also would be interesting. Or it's a case of like, oh, you have a Michelangelo, but that was specially like commissioned because you could do that at the time. Is that not interesting to you? Is it like, no, big boring beige room, that's what you want. Who wants the big boring beige room? There are tourists that go through this building. That's how they get people. We see this later on. They have to. What are the tourists looking at? But once they get to the main hall, they meet Arrow, who is the main leader. And then there's Caius, Marcus, and Jane. Also, by the way, in terms of the architecture, I do understand the fact that there's not a lot of windows. That's the one thing where I go, yes, if you're in Italy, you're probably going to want a lot of light if you're a regular human person. But I understand them being like, yeah, we don't really want windows because we can't really have people seeing in. Not only because they might see that, you know, sparkles over here, but also we're drinking people dry. People might not want to see that. They tend to get a bit fussy about it. I mean, honestly, it's like PC gone mad. You can't buy anyone these days. Now, I try to keep movie chat out of this. I try not to talk about it too much. I know I mentioned it a little bit in terms of, like, Vampire Baseball in the first one. But in terms of review, I try not to talk about it too much because, obviously, that's not why we're here. It's not really intrinsic to what we're talking about. I know it will probably come up later where we talk about the final battle. If you know, you know. The film did that so well, but apparently the books, that's kind of disappointing. The reason I bring the movies up, Michael Sheen was cast so fucking well as Arrow. That character is remarkably book accurate for a start, but he's so good at just playing absolute little freaks. I love that for us as the viewers, and for him, that he just gets to play little freaks all the time. I think that's phenomenal. Now, there's a couple of things being explored throughout this scene. Part of it is the fact that Bella is immune to the vampire superpowers. So, the most notable one being, in this scene, there are two. But in one case, Jane can basically put like an electric current through your entire body, and like if she touches you, and Edward like jumps in front of her just in case, and he gets this like huge spasms through his body, and when they touch her, it's nothing. But once again, plot hole, because I will say a quote later, but it doesn't make sense. I'll come back to it. I'll read it now. It's like, I think it says something like Marcus can see relationships or something. And the line after that is something like, and he's really surprised about the intensity of ours. Now, maybe that's just that he can read Edward and see the intensity of his feelings about her. But this feels like a thing that works two ways. So surely it would be, I can see the intensity of his feelings for you, but there's something cloudy here. We also have this, it's a really nice little detail that Meyer puts in. So, obviously, we are aware that vampires are, for want of a better phrase, designed to be incredibly alluring. That's one of their sort of predatory mechanisms, like James Charles using Snapchat. I don't know why James Charles jokes have just become a thing in my brain at the minute, but enjoy them while they're here, because I'm enjoying them. So anyway, the vampires are designed to be these perfect predators, and part of part of that is the fact that they are incredibly alluring. Now, there's this moment when Bella first sees Arrow. She's like, there's just something about him that's really, like, different, particularly about his skin, that she just looks at it and is just like, I can't explain why, but I want to reach out and touch his face, which obviously is a weird thought to have, but you're in a weird situation, like, fine. But then it turns out that his special ability is the ability to read the entirety of one's thoughts, basically like the thought version of search history. And the thing is, he can only do that by physical contact, if there's touching. And I think it's a nice detail to bring together the fact that the abilities that they have are inextricably linked to the way that they are alluring. And I wish it's something that she brought into focus a little bit more often. Like, I know that's hard to do with someone like Edward, because his is just reading thoughts, as if I could just, like, look at somebody and do that. Whereas, obviously, with the Arrow, he's going to be touching them, and it's a difference in how powerful that is and stuff like that. But I wish there was more of a focus on the fact that the abilities are part of what makes them alluring, and the fact that you want to make that ability happen, so you're going to bring somebody in. Now, obviously, Bella's immune. He can't read her thoughts, but the detail is still there. The detail is still there. Now, this meeting basically amounts to, Edward, you can, like, we're annoyed at you, but don't do it again. But you are basically off the hook. And also, you better be turning Bella as soon as possible, because if you're not going to let us have her, you better fucking do it. Chapter 22. Flight. So, right at the end of the last chapter, there's this moment where they're back in the lobby area and they see some tourists walking, like a group of tourists, walking towards the hall they've just been in where all the Volturi are. They get in, door closes, screaming ensues. And it's a really short scene, but it's a really nice little snippet of horror. It's a nicely done scene. And unsurprisingly, Bella's kind of fucked up by that. She's just listening to people die, right? Obviously, that's going to fuck you up a little bit, right? Eventually, she mostly manages to calm down so they can get a flight, fuck off home. And then when they land, they're greeted by the rest of the Cullens, and Rosalie is like, sorry. Sorry, I thought you died and then kind of caused all of this. Whoopsie. We get Bella back home, and unsurprisingly, Charlie's pissed the fuck off. And Edward basically just gets banished from the house. I mean, like, obviously, he's still going to climb in through her window because Charlie doesn't know that he does that. But for all intents and purposes, like, Edward is banned from the house. I'm like, yeah, he fucking would be. Chapter 23, The Truth. But Bella, she's a pissy little mare, isn't she? She's like, oh my god, my dad's so mean for banning you. Like, why would he do that? I'm gonna have words with him. Wah, 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 wah. Once again, use your brain if there is one in your head, please. Like, the man was at a funeral for somebody he has known for decades, and you left with like a couple of lines worth of a note, and you left to find your ex-boyfriend, an ex-boyfriend who left you in a 4-month pit of despair when he left. And you're going to expect him to be like, welcome home, Bella, yay! Have you considered not being such an inconsiderate baggage? Like, I swear to fucking God. And then Edward is like, because obviously he's now like, ooh, no, Bella maybe believed a bit too much and doesn't really like me that much. And he's like, ah ha ha ha. Actually, I'm just a really good liar, and you know all that shit I said in the woods? Doesn't matter. It's not actually true. I actually really love you loads and loads and loads, so maybe you'll take me back. And because Bella is like red-green colorblind, she's not seeing anything other than flags, so it's just like she's so just like, yeah, I'll take you back. Because I'm a pushover, and I love my vampire. Woo-hoo, yay! Like, I thought I had low standards, man. This girl takes the piss. But here, Edward, like, vows to end Victoria, and now, because of the Volturi, Bella's like, by the way, I need to be turned. But Edward's like, well, the thing is, you're forgetting the fact that they are centuries old. Time works a bit different for them. You might not be, like, of interest to them till you're, like, 30 or whatever, like, decades away. And she's like, till I'm 30? Hello? And actually, I do get that. Because it becomes clear later that she's like, she wants to at least remain within her teen years before, being transformed, which I get, because yes, he's 100 or so years older than her. He's going to be 17 for, like, he really just doesn't get this. He's going to be 17 forever. If he waits until she's 30, that's going to be fucking weird for her at some point. But obviously this, like, turn me, no, becomes a back and forth between them. And there's some reasonable points, and there's some not reasonable points. And it's all about humanity and her soul and all this, that, and the other. And basically she goes, fine. Well, this isn't just you and me anymore. Because the Volturi are involved, your whole family's now involved in this. Which they are. She has a good point. So she basically turns to him and goes, right, we're going to your family's place. And this is going to be a vote. they get to decide whether or not I get turned. Power move, if nothing else. Chapter 24. Vote. So off they go to the Cullens. Like, simple as that. But before heading in, they have this kind of heart-to-heart. And without a shred of irony, we have this. Don't, I whispered, touching his face. Don't be sad. Like, gee, thanks, but I hadn't fucking thought of that. Fuck's sake. Now, within the Cullens, when the vote takes place, yes, there is a bit of a split, but it does still go in Bella's favour. They are going to turn her. So, they basically set some, well, there's like a back and forth, and Edward gets angry, and Alice is like, yeah, we're not doing this right now, because I might kill you. So, ground rules are set, basically. It has to happen before she turns 20, and it has to happen after she's graduated from school, and because no biting before marriage, they have to get married first. Because obviously, she has to become the ultimate trad wife. Epilogue. Treaty. Yes, we're at the end. We're finally at the end. And you know what's funny? The epilogue is shit. Fuck all happens. The only thing that happens is there is a minor confrontation between Edward and Jacob, where Jacob is like, remember the treaty. It's not just if you kill Bella, or it's not just if you kill a human. If you bite them, as in turn them, then all hell will break loose. So remember that. That's it. That's all that matters. So, we're fucking finished. 2 hours and 35 minutes for me. That's how long this has taken to do this review. This book has a bad reputation, not only outside of the fandom, but also within it. And look, you know what his biggest fault is? It's the fact that it's kind of fucking boring. I know I've spoken about it for this long, so you might not think that, because some of the aspects of it are interesting. But, look, the thing is, a lot happens, but tonally, a lot of it feels like you're waiting for something to happen, but you're not getting a build-up to that thing happening. So, Edward leaves, and then, obviously, you've got the plot that's happening there, but you're waiting for Edward to come back, but there isn't a build-up to that happening. We have a bit of a build-up thing happening with the whole adrenaline thing, and we have, like, the first kind of a love triangle should happen here, except it shouldn't. And, like, whether you like love triangles or hate them, the issue isn't the fact that there is a love triangle here. It's the fact that Jacob is the type of person to be like, I'll wait for you, even if you don't like me back, you might do one day, so I'll wait. Gross. Bella can't have any decent friends, but, and Jessica doesn't count them, I'm not counting her among them. Bella was a shitty person to her, but the point is, this book is not, it doesn't slowly build up to that return, or to the point where at least Alice comes back. It's not a build up to that. It is Edward leaves, there's a different plot, and then Edward comes back, and it's just like, it feels boring. There's no better word for it. It's just like stuff happens, but not so other stuff can happen. It's just like stuff happens, then in the middle some other stuff happens, and then in the latter in the latter third, stuff happens and it's kind of related to the first third, but not really connected to the middle third, but it is sort of, and it's just like, I mean, I will say, at least with the first one, I could find myself laughing at it, but the thing with this one is we've kind of got a case of, like, one, we now have 2 toxic relationships instead of just fucking 1. 2, we have really ramped up the weird shit with Native Americans because they're just featuring more heavily. 3, like I said, we've got that It feels like it's meant to be somewhere at some point, but it doesn't feel like it's building up to it. And 4, we have a lot of melodramatic nonsense, and I'm talking even for teen and young adult fiction standards, because I'm aware there's often a little bit more melodrama in those books because we're dealing with teenage emotions. That's fine, but this just takes it like when Edward is watching Romeo and hello cat, like when he's watching Romeo and Juliet with Bella, and he's like, no, I'm not jealous of Romeo because he's got a girlfriend. I'm jealous of Romeo because, like, he can kill himself. Like, fuck me. So, yes, if you couldn't figure it out, this absolutely deserves the bad reputation that it is. So, yes, if you haven't figured it out by now, this book 1,000,000% deserves the bad reputation that it has earned. The plot is not great. The main characters are shitty people. Bella's a piece of shit to her friends, and she's like either dull or a dick. Edward is still like gaslight gatekeep girl boss, and Jacob is like a wet rag where he's just like, I'll wait for you. I mean, I've already been there, said that shit a million times, but like, trust me, I cannot explain to you how many times he says shit like that. That's really fucking irritating. So if I keep annoying you with that, good, you get an ounce of my suffering. Next month for Bad Reputation Book Club, we will be finishing up my trilogy of 50 Shades of Grey. I figured it was fitting after we've done Twilight for this month, and I also thought it would be nice to like round up the stuff that I've already started. And I've mentioned before that I will not be doing that with After. That book series is not even laughably bad. It's difficult to read because with Twilight, with 50 Shades of Grey, there is an active power play going on. There is somewhat of a power fantasy that you can sort of understand. With After, it's just glorified abuse. That's it. That's all it is. And it's incredibly difficult to read. I do not just want to read about emotional abuse, but I'm meant to want that relationship. It's not an easy book to read. It's a hard no. And the thing is, I know I've said I will read more Colleen Hoover in the future. Not a huge amount, just some more. But the thing with that is that at the very least, I'm getting a fresh plot. So there's a couple that I want to read. Well, I don't want to read, but I'm going to probably read, where I'm not revisiting the same characters going, why are you still here? This is just going on for so long. So yeah, I won't be looking at After anymore. But next month, 50 Shades, it will work like this week has. So it will probably be a 3-day affair rather than just a 2-day, because obviously there are 2 books to catch up on. But it will basically depend on how long the wrap up is. I will probably say if it's more than an hour, I will split it into 2. But it will either be Tuesday and Thursday, or it'll be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So you just get a little block of Bad Reputation Book Club. Next week, back to regularly scheduled programming. Next week on, I think I have 2 books next week. Yeah. So we have Clement Knox's Strange Antics. It's a piece of non-fiction about the history of seduction, and I just thought that was really fun. And then on Thursday, we have 2 books. We Had to Remove This Post by Hannah, I'm not sure how to say their surname, but Bervoets, I believe, Bervoets, and A Touch of Jen by Beth Morgan. both books looking at like influencer type stuff. They're both fiction, but exploring like influencer and social media type stuff. Kat, can you get down, please? Thank you. So I really look forward to seeing you. I really appreciate you if you have stuck through this video for so long. I mean, currently I'm at the 2 hours and 45 minute mark. I don't know where you'll be at by this point, but it's still going to be an incredibly long video, and I legitimately appreciate any of you that have stuck with me this long. So all I ask is that you leave a little like, make sure you're subscribed if you're not already, and you don't even have to leave a proper comment. Leave, I don't know, an emoji to, let's pick an emoji to let me know that you've got this far. Is there a monkey emoji? If there's a monkey emoji, put that in there, and if not, just write the word monkey in the, or like cursed monkey or something like that. Write that in the comments, make that a feature of it, and I'll know that you've got this far. So yeah, I'm not going to ramble on too much longer because we've been here long enough. So like I say, thank you. This is a really long video, and this project, the Bad Red Book Club projects, when I do them properly like this, they are long and hard projects. It takes time to do all of this. So like I say, I really appreciate you sticking around this long, but I have to go because I need to be up early tomorrow so I can start editing, and the cat's complaining at me, so I've got to get going. So you know what, let's just wrap this up here. I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful whenever you are watching this. Do take good care of yourselves and don't be reading garbage like this. Right.